All right, jumping into our next lesson here, we are actually going to be reviewing a abridged version of an old lesson today that's going to help set up what we're going to talk about next week. So we are kind of taking a break from the Gospels for just a little bit, just to give some groundwork for Satan. So to talk about Satan. Now we all have an idea of who Satan is. So if you were to think, who would you refer to as Satan? Like how would you describe Satan? Most of us instantly think of the little red man with a pitchfork and horns, and we call him the devil. And this idea actually is not not accurate. This is not founded in anything in the Bible. In fact, this idea originated actually from the early church, and there was a variety of different imagery that was used. But essentially, the early church was looking for a way to fight back against Satan, and they determined that his greatest weakness was his pride. And so, because of this, they decided to attack his pride by creating a ridiculous cartoon of him. And so, this image is kind of the generalized idea. Obviously, this is not from the medieval times or even earlier than that, but this is a generalized idea of that concept, the goofy looking man with a pitchfork, spiky tail, and horns that's red. This is kind of the image that the early church came up with, and they used it as a almost a smear campaign against Satan, that he was not all that. And so this now the imagery they chose was based in certain myths and whatnot, but the goofy idea, the goofy concept of the little red devil is from the early church actually. And as interesting of an idea as that is, if anything, it probably has had negative effects rather than good effects, in that it has caused us to possibly even underestimate Satan. Satan is just this goofy little red gremlin, nothing to be afraid of, when in reality he is actually definitely very powerful and something we need to be very cautious around. So let's look in the course of this lesson. I just really want to break down how the Bible talks about Satan. What is it that he is referred to? What does he do? Who is he? And kind of give you a better idea of this, both looking at the Old Testament and the New Testament. So this is going to be a quick run through. We've talked about this again, like I said, in the past, a few months ago, when we talked about spiritual beings. This is just going to be, again, a quick run through. So, starting in the Old Testament, we see him first as the serpent in Genesis 1. Remember Adam and Eve in the garden, and they're tempted by a serpent. That's Satan. It's this image of a sly serpent who tempts Adam and Eve. Now, Satan is referred to in the Bible, or it's Hebrew, and it means it's referred to actually as the Satan, and it means the adversary is actually what it literally means. And so the adversary is this idea of this gives us an idea of who Satan is, basically the bad guy. And so in the Old Testament, he is actually only ever called the Satan on 3 separate occasions. First one is in 1 Chronicles 21:1. Satan rose up against Israel and incited David to take a census of Israel. And so David was not allowed to take a census, and yet Satan tempts him into taking a census of Israel when God had not specifically instructed it. So he takes on this tempting role in this first instance where he's referred to by a name. Next one is in Job. Chapters 1 and 2, we see this term for Satan come up. One day the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth in it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." "Does Job fear God for nothing?" Satan replied. "Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." The Lord said to Satan, "Very well then, everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself do not lay a finger." Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Okay, so we see Satan returns in chapter 2. He says Job will curse God if Satan can harm his body, and God allows him to bring boils on Job, and Job just has a really rough go of it in this book. And essentially, it's because God and Satan have this bet going on. And the storyline, it's a very simplified version of it, but in its essence, it's kind of what happens here. And we see that Satan takes on this accusatory role in the story of Job. He is saying, Job, he only follows you because you give him everything. But if you take everything good away from him, he'll curse you. And so he is accusing Job of not truly being as genuine as he appears to be. So one important thing to note about that comes up in this passage is it says that Satan was roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it, which means that Satan is not omnipresent. Now, what does omnipresent mean? Omnipresent means that God is omnipresent. God can be all places at once. Satan is limited to one location at a time. So just like you or I are currently wherever you're at when you're listening to this, I'm not also with you, literally, but God is with us both. Whereas Satan, he can only be in one location at a time. So he is not omnipresent. And so we see that in this verse, he was roaming about the earth. And so it can be easy, as we think about Satan, to have this concept that Satan is everywhere all at once, just like God, but he is much more limited than God is. And so when you deal with temptation, when you deal with sin, you're not necessarily directly dealing with Satan himself. In fact, very rarely, if ever, are you. We'll talk about that later. So, another instance, third instance here that we see Satan mentioned is in Zechariah 3:1-2, where it says, "Then he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right side to accuse him. The Lord said to Satan, The Lord rebuke you, Satan. Is not this man a burning stick snatched from the fire?" The passage goes on where basically Jesus gives this man fresh, clean clothes, and God essentially defends the high priest who Satan was accusing. But we see again in this that Satan is demonstrating his role as an accuser once again. It's contrasted very beautifully with the angel of the Lord who forgives sin. And we see how God actually responds to our sin. Satan wasn't wrong. Joshua, the high priest, had sinned. And this shows us, kind of reveals a tactic of Satan's, that he often reminds us of our sin so that it chains us to our guilt. But God forgives sin. If you have ever been in a place where you've done something that you're ashamed of, that was wrong, you ask for forgiveness from God, and then weeks later you're still feeling bad about it, you still feel terrible about it. The Bible says that God forgave your sin. You were forgiven. It's like it had never happened. It was blotted out, and yet Satan reminds you of your sin. He uses that sin to chain you to your guilt, to always find to feel bound down by how flawed and sinful you are. And so this is what Satan, he is the accuser. This is what he does, is one of his main tactics we see. All right. Now, in the New Testament, we see he's called a number of different names, and those names all shine light on who he is. So the first name, we're just going to go through each of those names just to give you an idea about him. But he's called the devil, which actually means slanderer. That's very similar to this idea of the accuser, except slander and accusation are a little different. Accusation is making a claim about somebody. It could be true, it could not be true. Slander is specifically making an accusation or saying something about someone with the intent of ruining their reputation. And so he is referred to here as the devil, which means slanderer. So very similar, but a little bit different, even a little bit worse almost. Ephesians 6:11, where we see this: "Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes." And we also see he is referred to as Beelzebub. Matthew 12:24. "But when the Pharisees heard this, they said, 'It is only by Beelzebul, the prince of demons, that this fellow drives out demons.'" So there's this concept, this Beelzebub that's referred to, that was known by the people as the prince of demons. Satan is the prince of demons. He is not a demon himself. He is the lord over the demons, essentially. And so this is another term for him. Belial is another one. 2 Corinthians 6:15. What harmony is there between Christ and Belial, or what does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? Belial is a Hebrew word for wicked or worthless, and so this is contrasting Jesus with Satan, saying there's no harmony between these two. Jesus is perfect. Satan is worthless, is wicked. So that's another one. The next one is the evil one. We see this in John 5:19, 1 John 5:19. We know that we are children of God and that the whole world is under the control of the evil one. This is a much more ominous name. He is the evil one, the chief villain. And so this is this pretty self-explanatory term in and of itself. Another one that we see now coming up again, the tempter. So this is more kind of what we think of Satan as, tempted by Satan. 1 Thessalonians 3:5. For this reason, when I could stand in it no longer, I sent to find out about your faith. I was afraid that in some way the tempter had tempted you, and that our labors might have been in vain. So Satan is the tempter, the father of temptation. We know that temptation does. In James tells us temptation does not come from God. God won't tempt you. This is something that Satan does. So another name for him is the prince of this world. Now is the time for in John 12:31. Now is the time for judgment on this world. Now the prince of this world will be driven out. And so this is the idea that this world is not our home. This world is a fallen place, and because it is fallen, Satan is having his time right now where he is ruling over it. He is reigning over this world, but in reality, he's not the real ruler, and he's going to be seated off his throne. So 2 Corinthians 4:4 gives another one, the god of this age. This is very similar to the last one, the same kind of concept. The God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers so that they cannot see the light of the gospel that displays the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. So Jesus is the image of God. Satan has taken on the little g role, the God of this age, that we treat him like a God. But it is just an age, it's just a period, a fallen age, and it is temporary. Then we see the same term that we saw in the Old Testament pop up again, the accuser. Revelation 12:9-10, the great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now have come the salvation and power, and the kingdom of God, and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters, who accuses them before our God day and night, has been hurled down. Also called dragon here. So he's also called the dragon here, and this harkens back to the serpent. So this is Satan is the accuser, accusing us before God day and night. And we see this dragon imagery thinking back to the serpent as well. So John 8:44 calls Satan the father of lies. You belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. So basically, what we're seeing here in this verse is that Satan only ever speaks in lies, and so he's very deceitful. And then, lest we take Satan for granted, because of course Satan has been defeated, but we are still to be very cautious around him. 1 Peter 5:8, be alert and sober-minded. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. If you were to know that there was a lion roaming around the parking lot right now, or outside your house, between you and your car, you wouldn't just walk out to your car. You would be much more cautious about that. And so it's saying that don't underestimate that Satan is dangerous. You are just human. Satan is very powerful, very dangerous. Now, he has been defeated. He holds no power over us as believers, but he is not someone who cannot hurt you. And so to be cautious of that and have essentially respect for that in the same sense that you would if there was a lion that was roaming around outside wanting to eat you. So these names are some of the best insights that we have into who Satan really is. But then this question is, if we know all this about Satan, why is it that people fall for his lies all the time? Well, the reason for this is that the best lies are not blatant ones. They are ones that are founded in truth, and they're subtle. They seem good, and there's just enough truth to them that you want to believe it. Why wouldn't you believe that? I know this thing is true. Why wouldn't the rest of it be true? And so this leads us to the last name that we see for Satan in the New Testament, and that is the angel of light. 2 Corinthians 11:14, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. What does this mean? Angel of light, well, we know his name in the Old Testament is Lucifer, which means morning star. Satan is actually beautiful. We picture Satan as this monstrous thing, but in reality, Satan actually likely is an incredibly beautiful angel. Even still, the description we have of him in the Old Testament is that he is beautiful, that he was led worship for God, and he was this incredibly gorgeous morning star. And so Satan is masquerading as something that is very good, very beautiful, something that you would want to follow. But in reality, he is evil and lies and deceitful, and outward appearances are very deceptive. And so this is why we fall so easily for Satan. Now, like I said earlier, most people will probably never encounter Satan himself. He is not omnipresent. Frankly, he can't be everywhere by himself, and quite frankly, he has bigger fish to fry, most likely, than you or I. Doesn't mean you won't encounter Satan as a direct temptation to you. I pray that you never do. I pray I never do. But the odds are good that he's probably focusing on world leaders, significant religious leaders, etc. So you may or may not ever actually encounter Satan personally. But what I will say is that Satan, like I said before, we don't have to be afraid. We need to be cautious. Jesus has already defeated Satan, and we're going to see that. And so, what we're going to see next week, and what we're going to talk about next week, is that Jesus' encounter with Satan. And so, I just wanted to introduce him a little bit and refresh on who he is before we encounter him again next week.